All right, I'm so excited. Before we start, I want to say thank you, especially to Lily Naz as well as Miriam, for really putting this together. Like, I know we just felt so inspired. And then from inspiration to actuality, I have to thank Lily Naz and Miriam. So thank you so much. Really, thank you for putting together a WhatsApp group and just kickstarting this. And then thank you to all of us, because I really feel like this is funny, I'm looking over the screen, but I have to look this way, because now I see it. I feel like we're just a group of friends, a group of people who know each other from learning together. And now there's an opportunity for us to get to know each other in a much more intimate fashion. And I find that ultimately the people you learn with are the people that you grow with. And the people you grow with are the people that you never lose touch with. So whether you like it or not, we're in it for the big hole, okay? Because at a certain point, talking about the weather gets really boring. There are that many recipes you can exchange with people, you know? There are that many times you can ask people to how your kids again. I don't have kids, remember? Oh, how your kids anyway, because I have nothing else to ask you about. The people you learn with, there's a certain intellectual as well as, I believe, a neshama connection that you keep moving forward. And that's something very special. So I want to thank you. I want to thank you, Betsy, and Sarala, and Winnie the Pooh, and Lily Naz, and Miriam for really being here with us. I hope Chaya will be able to join. That's the truth. But whether she does or doesn't, she's part of us. So by show of, yeah, go ahead, Lil.
I sent Chaya a message, and she said she's not going to be able to make it because she's not feeling very well.
Okay.
And she said sorry.
That's okay. I'll reach out to her and wish her my well wishes. Bezrat Hashem. But by a show of hands, did you get the sheets and were you able to pull them up? Yes? Okay, awesome. So what I'd like to do is, let's start. Okay, let's start. And like I had mentioned in the WhatsApp group, this is going to be an independent 6-week series, which means they'll be self-contained, enough that we could walk away with something, as well as the interim weeks. I'm going to make you the teachers, and we'll talk about that at the end. Don't get scared yet, okay? But I promise you it'll be interesting, and it'll give us an opportunity not just to learn together from me, but also from everybody else, because we all bring wisdom to the table. That's the truth, you know? It can be that you come 25 years, 30 years into something, and you have nothing to offer. You may not have something specific to offer in one area, but guaranteed you have something else to offer. And that's really the goal, to be able to share and to cross-pollinate. Yeah. So why don't we take your sheets out if you can, please. And I'm going to actually start. I'm just going to say good evening to you again so they know where to cut the video. So you're going to get many good evenings from me. So if you look at the title over here, it's called Yeshayahu's Call to Social Justice. By show of hands, how many of you studied Yeshayahu already in the past? Yeah, touched on him? No? Okay, awesome. Fine, so let's start. Let me just see how I have space here. All right. Good evening and welcome to our class on Yeshayahu's Call for Social Justice. If you look at the top, you'll notice there's a quote from Megillah where we say, Kidetanya, Harbe Nevi'im amdu lahem liYisrael, kiflayim kiyotze Mitzrayim. We know for a fact that we had thousands and thousands of prophets, okay? So what happened to them? I don't know about you, but there are only 48 books of prophecy that we have, and we have recorded about 53 prophets that we know of. Where did all the thousands of prophets go? And we're talking, it's not like one record's missing. You know, in Israel, they're finally finding a whole bunch of records that were once upon a time missing for 90 years mysteriously, and then suddenly we found them, right? We're talking about thousands and thousands of prophets who we have nothing recorded from them. Right? So the Megillah tells us something very interesting, right? Our Chachamim say there were thousands of prophets. Ela nevuah shehutzricha ledorot. Rather, the only prophecy that was recorded was prophecy that was relevant for generations to come. V'shel nichteva, that was written down. V'shelo hutzlacha lo nichteva. But prophecy that wasn't relevant past the day it was said, there's no reason to record it. And it's fascinating because out of thousands of prophets, we only have 48. From thousands of people who gave over the word of God, who wrote books and spoke and put up YouTube lectures. Sometimes I feel that way. I get so many WhatsApp messages and like, you should watch this and you should watch that. And I'm like, did anybody screen the content first? Yeah. Because just because somebody had a camera with really high quality and they were able to ramble on incessantly, doesn't mean it's really quality. And you find over here that the prophets, and let's be honest, the prophets who were giving Nevuah, they were relevant, right? It wasn't that they were saying nonsense, but their messages didn't last past the day that they lived. It didn't last past the generation that they lived. And then you see the flip side. The flip side is when you read the words of the Navi. Specifically today, we're going to read the words of Navi Yeshayahu. I sometimes feel like he was looking into a window of 2021. Okay? That's the crazy thing. You read the words of the prophet and you're like, wow, I now understand why he was a Navi. I mean, what he wrote then seems like he was looking into our generation, at our Jewish community, as our problems. Now you may argue and say, well, humanity didn't change. So the same evils that plagued them then plague us now. The same things that they struggled with then, we struggle with today. But that's what makes a prophet relevant. When he's able to say something 2,000 years ago, and today, we're still able to learn from it. Now I want to look at for a second, if you can take the other sheet, it's just the monarch timeline, okay? And I want to put it into context for you. Yeah? Who is Yeshayahu HaNavi? What time does he span? Where does he live? So if you look at this chart, okay, some people love charts, some people hate charts. I happen to be somebody who loves charts, but don't be afraid, okay? If it's something that's confusing, I'm going to walk you through it. So this is really a timeline of the Jewish monarchy. If you'll notice, you have the top, which is, it says you have the kings of Israel, right? So all the kings of Israel, and then unfortunately they split after Shlomo HaMelech. You have on the left column the kings of Yehuda, and on the bottom the kings of Israel. Yeshayahu HaNavi is known as Yeshayahu ben Amoz. A rule of thumb, anytime you see a prophet and the name of his father is mentioned, you know that his dad was a prophet as well. So Yeshayahu was born into a family of prophecy. Unlike, for example, if you look at Yirmiyahu HaNavi, it doesn't mention his father's name. The reason being, he wasn't born into a family of prophecy. Now, prophecy is not genetic, okay? That's why you could have prophets who their parents were not prophets. But over here, the rule of thumb is anytime you find a Navi, Ben, and it says his name, Ben Amoz, his dad was a prophet. In addition, let's look over here at the chart. If you go down, look at the reign, because that might be the easiest. Yeah, if you find the reign of Uzziah, you see 52? Okay, so Yeshayahu spans this time. He spans 4 kings. Uzziah ben Amaziah, Yotam ben Uzziah, Achaz ben Yotam, and Chizkiyahu. He spans 4 kings. He lives for 120 years. And what's interesting is we know that Yeshayahu comes from the family of royalty. His dad, Amatz, was the brother of the king Amaziah, which means Yeshayahu was the nephew of the king. It explains a lot of his prophecy, because where others might have been afraid, you know, I could give criticism to the locals, but how can I criticize the leadership? Like, they could just off with his head. That was treasonous. Now go to prison for the next 50 years, right? Look at current events. When you have opposition, it's very easy to just take the opposition and make them gone, unless the opposition is part of the royalty. If the opposition is part of the leading powers, it's a lot harder to mess with them. And you find that Yeshayahu is not just a son of a prophet, but he's also the nephew of the king. And he has the audacity to critique the kingdom, to critique the politics and say, I know from the inside. You know, what they read in the local newspapers, that's what you want them to know. As an insider, I could tell you the corruption that goes on behind closed doors. As an insider, I know the truth. Yeshayahu is also a prophet that lives in Yerushalayim. He lives in the capital city. So he really is in the know. It's not somebody from the outside coming and saying, well, I'm speculating that this is what I see based on facts and statistics and my diagrams. Yeshayahu said, based on my life, my personal experience, my interaction with the community and its leadership, I'm coming to critique it. And that's something very special. Now you find, question? No. Okay. By the way, please feel free to interject, okay? I can just continue talking incessantly. I'm more than happy for you to interject, so please stop me and just feel free. Yes, Betsy, go ahead.
Which nephew did he say he was of? Which king?
So if you look at the chart, you see Amaziah ben Yoash. Amaziah was his uncle. His dad and Amaziah were brothers. And then Yoash, the king before, was his grandfather. So we're talking about royalty, meaning he's from the family of royalty. He spans 4 kingdoms. You find that the nature of his prophecy is very similar to that of Moshe Rabbeinu. In fact, you find many Gemarot that compare how these prophets were similar, whether it was the way they got the prophecy, the way they gave it over to the people, the messages that they gave over to the people. In fact, we're going to look at the first chapter. You'll see this chapter that we're going to study is the Haftarah that we read by Parshat Devarim. Yeah, when Moshe Rabbeinu is saying his last words to the Jewish people, the similarities between the words, right? Moshe Rabbeinu, for example, says, Ha'azinu HaShamayim v'dabera. Yeshayahu starts with, Shimu HaShamayim v'ha'azinu et ha'aretz. The similarities between their styles is impeccable. In fact, I believe it's in Masechet, here. It says, Yesh, here we are. I want to read to you something interesting. From the Midrash, it says, Kol ha-Nevi'im shayu mitnabim, lo hayu yodim ma mitnabim. All the prophets, they would just download, but they didn't necessarily know what they were saying. Ela Moshe v'Yoshua hayu yodim. But Moshe and Yeshayahu, they knew. En lecha gdol b'Nevi'im mi Moshe v'Yeshayahu. You don't have anybody as great as Moshe and Yeshayahu. V'shneim lo ba'u ela b'tachanunim. And both of them only achieved their greatness through prayer. They're really supplicating to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You find a lot of commonality. You also find something very interesting, which is their harsh words to the Jewish people, and yet their love for the Jewish people. And whereas we may look at it as 2 polar opposites, it's really part of the same coin. Shlomo HaMelech tells us, Vet asher yahav Adonai yochiach. Those who God loves, he rebukes. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't know if I want that much love, right? It's like, if I'm the one who always gets picked on, so please don't love me. The truth is, though, think about your neighbors. I don't care what my neighbors do in their house. Yeah, my neighbors have a 3-year-old, just like we have a 4-year-old, they have a 3-year-old. I don't care if they never do bedtime. I don't care if they don't give baths. I don't care if she lets her kids eat candy all day. It's not my business, right? What happens in my house, I care about. Yeah. If the neighbor down the block tells me, oh, I don't like your outfit, okay, that's fine. Right? I heard your speech, it was really boring. That's fine. Right? If somebody who's close to you rebukes you, it matters because you care. It works the other way around too. The people who care about us are the ones who are willing to risk the relationship to call us out on things that they see wrong. The people who love us are willing to say, you know what? I don't care if you never talk to me another day in your life. This is so important for me to tell you that I'm willing to put our relationship on the line. You find the same thing with the Navi Yeshayahu, where he's so tough on the Jewish people. He criticizes them in the most harsh terms. And yet he's the same prophet who brings us the words of Nechama, the words of comfort, the words of hope, the words of, I'm telling you all this because I care. We find that Yeshayahu ultimately has a very tragic ending, which is with Menashe. So if you look at the chart, we said that Yeshayahu gives prophecy for the time period of Uzziah, Yotam, Achaz, and Chizkiyahu. We know that Chizkiyahu has a son, Menashe HaMelech, right? And about Menashe HaMelech, it says that he was Choteh u'machati et harabim. He was a sinner, and he took all of the nation with him. This little midrash is Agadah. This Agadah is actually found in Megillah, I believe 14a, where it's found as a footnote, where it says in the footnote, and Menashe HaMelech killed Yeshayahu HaNavi. Yes? The story is as follows. Menashe HaMelech calls Yeshayahu HaNavi, and he says to him, you prophesied things that are not true. And he brings proof from Moshe Rabbeinu, things that Moshe Rabbeinu had said, And then Yeshayahu had said, and he says, your texts are not compatible, so you must be a false prophet, and therefore we should kill you. And Yeshayahu realizes that this has nothing to do with the truth, and everything to do with a personal hatred towards the message that Yeshayahu is bringing. So Yeshayahu flees. He runs away, and he runs into the forest, and he whispers the Shem Hashem. He uses the name of God, and gets swallowed into a cedar tree. The only thing that's sticking out of the cedar tree is the sides of his tzitzit. Menashe HaMelech's students, they come, right? The soldiers, they come, they're running, they can't find him, and suddenly they see a cedar tree with tzitzit sticking out. Yeah? And they go to Menashe HaMelech and they say, well, one second, we found him, but he's stuck in the tree. So Menashe says, go to that tree and chop the tree down until you see blood running out of it. And that's what they do. And they chop and they chop and they chop. And the Agadah says he didn't die until they struck him by his mouth. Why by his mouth? Because Yeshayahu HaNavi once said, B'toch am tmei svatayim anochi yashev. He was rebuking the Jewish people, and he said, me, I sit amongst those who have filthy mouths. Hashem said, you want to talk about yourself and your problems? That's fine. Don't you dare talk about my children that way. And it's weird because on the one hand, Hashem is the one who sends them with all this rebuke. And yet ultimately, the Navi has this balance of being harsh and yet remembering that the harshness comes at a price because who you're critiquing. You're critiquing the children of God. You're critiquing the children of the Creator. And whereas the message is important, the delivery is just as important. Now, Yeshayahu it's interesting. For the Jewish people, so Yeshayahu is this interesting universalist and also nationalist, because a lot of his prophecy is aimed both towards the Jewish community specifically, as well as to the rest of the world. The researchers and the Bible critics find this incompatible, and they've decided that there must be two Yeshayahu HaNavis. In fact, they call it Isaiah 1 and Isaiah 2. They say the styles are so different, it can't be it's the same prophet. We find who jumps on this bandwagon? Interestingly enough, the Christians. Yeah. I was once in Costco, and somebody said, he's like, you Jewish? I said, yes, why? He's like, did you read Isaiah 50? I said, I've read all of Isaiah and the rest of the prophets. What? And he was tagging me around. I said, listen, dude, I'm just here to buy my groceries. You go read the rest of the Bible. I'm going to keep the Isaiah that we own. But it's interesting. For example, if you look at remember the famous debate that Nachmanides, Ramban, has in 1263? Do you remember that debate? There was a famous debate called.
Sorry, is this the disputation of Barcelona?
Yeah, exactly. It's the disputation of Barcelona. What happens there?
If I'm not mistaken, the Spanish king has summoned someone from the Jewish community that should give them proofs that, to defend their religion, Jewish religion, so that. Against the accusations that Christians have against them, and that would be the disputation between one of the bishops or cardinals and someone from the Jewish community. And Nachmanides goes, and he argues so well that there's just beyond that he's just so logical and it's just so clear that it's just completely 100% clear that basically Jews are right. But obviously the king cannot say that because the king himself is Catholic and he would look stupid. So he just lets him go, but at the same time he can't actually agree to let the Jews win. And Nachmanides says, I think there that you only believe in these things because you've had them from birth. If someone told you that, if you didn't know the Catholic religion, you would think it's just complete nonsense. It's just all fables. So, but you have to believe them because that's what you've been fed to all your life, so you just naturally believe it. But logically it makes no sense. So
you summarized it perfectly. It was James of Aragon. I say Aragon, but I'm sure you pronounce it Aragon, where he this is very interesting. There was somebody, Pablo Christiani. You always have to have a good Jew who messes it up for the Jews. So he was actually a Jewish apostate, who said, why don't we set up a debate? Let's show how nonsensical the Jews are. And obviously the debates always ended with, the logical conclusion was not, so let's just live in peace and believe two different things. It's, so then let's slaughter the Jews, right? That's normally the logical conclusion of these debates, right? So King James of Aragon calls the Ramban, Nachmanides, to come. And they debate, and like you said, Miriam, at a certain point he realizes the Ramban is obviously, he's saying things that make so much sense that he cuts off the debate in the middle and he doesn't let them finish, right? Now, before the debate, Ramban said, listen, I'm terrified. I'm going to come. I'm going to speak my mind, and then what are you going to do? You're going to execute me. So the king had promised him protection. After the debate, he pulls the protection for a little, but then immediately reinstates it. The Ramban stays in the city for Shabbat, and the king actually comes. I believe it's the king, not the Pope, but don't quote me on this. He comes to the synagogue to listen to the Ramban speak, and he later on makes a statement where he says, I've never heard an unjust cause so nobly defended. Meaning, you didn't win, but you did a really, really good job at defending yourself. If you look at the debate, which by the way is fascinating to read, most of it is based on Yeshayahu, meaning most of the texts that they're studying are texts of Yeshayahu, because for the Christians, Yeshayahu is a whole different person than we know. All right, so that's Yeshayahu Hanavi. I want to look at two of his texts and then talk about, so what were his messages and what does it have to do with us today? Yep. So if you look back at our papers, here. Look at source number 2. This is it's a direct from Yeshayahu chapter 1. Now, this chapter, Yeshayahu Aleph, is actually, like I said, the Haftarah read by Parshat Devarim. The next one, which is Yeshayahu Nun Chet, chapter 58, is what we read on Yom Kippur. It's part of the Haftarah that we read on Yom Kippur, and you'll see in a minute why. Why are his words chosen? In fact, if you look at, another time, if you ever gone to Sefaria.org, scroll down to the bottom. They have visualizations. Have you ever seen those? Those visualizations it's the wow factor. Basically, they have a chart that will show you Tanakh on the top and then Talmud on the bottom, and it shows you where they interconnect, where they cross-reference. You'll notice something very interesting, which is Yeshayahu Hanavi is the most cross-referenced text from the Tanakh in the Talmud. We're talking about a ridiculous amount of cross-referencing that goes on. So here you have Yeshayahu Aleph. Let's start reading. Chazon Yeshayahu ben Amotz, Asher Chazal Yehuda v'Yerushalayim. This is the vision of Yeshayahu, the son of Amotz, that he gave to the city of Yerushalayim, Bimei Uziyahu, Yotam, Achaz, Yechizkiyahu, Malchei Yehuda, during the lifespan of these 4 kings. Shimu Shamayim v'Hazinu Haaretz. Remember, similar words to what Moshe Rabbeinu said. Hazinu Hashamayim. Shimu Hashamayim, let the heaven hear. V'Hazinu Haaretz ki Adonai diber, because Hashem has spoken. Banim gidalti v'romamti. I have raised children. I brought them up. V'hema pashubi. And what did they do in return? They just sinned towards me. Yadash shor koneo v'chamor evus ba'alav. Even a donkey knows who owns him. The average animal, who may not be as intelligent as the human being, though some human beings never cease to amaze me at how stupid they can be, right? But even an animal knows who owns them, right? If you have a pet, I'll give you an example. We have birds. The birds are incredible. Now the birds are in our kitchen. When I open my bedroom door, so they hear the handle, right? They hear the doorknob turning, they start chirping. They don't do that when other people come. Why do they do that when I come in? Because they know I'm the person who gives them food. It's not because they love me, it's because they know, I don't think birds are capable of love necessarily, but they know I'm their owner. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, even an animal knows who owns them. Yisrael lo yadu ami, lo etbonen. And my nation, the Jewish people, some reason they don't know me. They don't know who I am. Hoi goy chote, am kaved avon, zeram reim, banim mashchitim. He says, look at this nation of a bunch of sinners, children of evil, banim mashchitim, corrupt sons. Azvu et Adonai, niyatzu et kedosh Yisrael, nazaro achad. They've left the way of the Torah and mitzvot. Al metakurot. He says, what's it worth punishing you more? What's it worth inflicting anything? Sara kirosh lecholi v'chol levav devai. The whole body of the Jewish people is already suffering. What does it help to inflict it more? Mikaf regel v'ad rosh. From the palm of your foot, from the sole all the way up to your head. En bo metom petza v'chabura u'makat riyah. There's no place on the Jewish body that is not afflicted. V'lo chuvshu v'lo uruchba b'shemen. Right? No ointments could treat it. Artzachem shmama, at this point in history, right? It's just a couple of years until the 10 tribes are going to be taken into exile. The land is run over. Arechim srufot esh, your cities are being burnt down. Admechem negdechem, zarim ochlimota, your land is being taken over by foreign occupators. K'mapechat zarim, and the whole place is in shambles. V'notra bat Zion kisuka b'karem, and Yerushalayim is being left like a little hut in the middle of a field where people only visit once in a while. Kimluna b'mishka ki'ir netzura, like those little huts that they put up for farmers when, they have to watch the field. The watchman comes maybe once a day and then he leaves. Lule Adonai tzvaot hotir lanu sarit kemat kistom hayinu lamora daminu. Had it not been for HaKadosh Baruch Hu protecting us, we would have ended up already at this point like the city of Sodom and Amorah, which we know was completely destroyed. The Navi is setting up the stage over here, where he's rebuking the people in the harshest of words and saying, I don't understand. You are so beaten. You're so bruised. The city's in shambles. We're being taken over by outside forces. And for some reason, nothing registers here. The average animal knows more than the Jewish citizen. Now here's where the rebuke gets personal. Okay? Look at Pasuk Yud. Shimu dvar Adonai, k'tzinei Sodom. Listen to the words of Hashem, you officers of Sodom. Ha'azinu Torat Eloheinu am Amorah. Listen to the words, to the Torah of Hashem, you nation of Amorah. Now you tell me, what do you know about Sodom and Amorah? What kind of city was Sodom and Amorah?
Not great.
Huh?
Not great.
Why not?
They did not like Pesach.
Tell me, define to me what was cruel about them. You're right, they were a cruel nation. Why? What made Sodom and Amorah stand out?
They were like really bad hosts, like the strangers amongst them, instead of looking after them, they attacked them.
So you see, Sodom and Amorah are not quoted as the most evil cities, the top 10 worst cities to visit. It wasn't because of their idolatry, and it wasn't because they didn't eat kosher, and it wasn't because they wore short sleeves, God forbid. You understand? That's not what made Sodom bad, okay? It wasn't because they didn't light Shabbat candles every week and bake challah. That's not what made them evil, right? It wasn't because they didn't buy all the minivans that nice Jewish families have to have. It wasn't because they didn't send their children to Jewish schools because they couldn't pay the tuition. That's not what made Sodom and Amorah bad. Yeah, I want to look at source 3. I want to read to you the English. You have the Hebrew text there. I want to read to you the English. What made Sodom and Amorah so bad? Why are they the epitome of evil? So this is from the En Yaakov, which is a commentary on the Aggadic part of the Talmud. It says, there were 4 judges in Sodom. Every one of them had a name which meant false, lie, etc. If a person struck his neighbor's wife and she miscarried, they used to decide that the woman should be given to the striker and he should return her when she would be pregnant again. If it happened that one cut off the ear of his neighbor's ass, right, his donkey, they used to decide that the donkey should be delivered to the striker till it should be cured. If one wounded his neighbor, they decided that the striker should be paid for bleeding him, right? You did him a service. You did bloodletting for him. Some people pay for that. Over here, you got it for free. He who passed the river on a bridge had to pay 4 zuz, and he who passed it by foot had to pay 8 zuz. And then it continues on to tell us about, you see, what makes Sodom and Amorah so evil is not that they were lawless citizens, right? It wasn't that they didn't have a legal code and therefore everybody did what they wanted. To the contrary, They had a legal system that created the most injustice, all under the name of law. Right? A lady miscarried because somebody hurt her, so logically, she should now be given to the person who hurt her so that he can make her pregnant again. What kind of crazy logic is that? Right? Lily Naz, you mentioned the cruelty. So they say there was a story about a girl, Riva, who she sees somebody who's poor and she gives him food. He's starving to death. And the city finds out that she did an act of kindness. So they take her and they smear her from head to toe with honey and they put her on the roof and she gets stung to death. Because that was the law. You understand? It wasn't a lawless city. To the contrary, it was a judicial system that was meant to oppress, take advantage, and hurt the other. And that's something that's unacceptable. Yeah? Because the people of Sodom, those who belonged to the city, they were protected, right? We're just taking care of ourselves. You hear that all the time. I'm just watching out for my own good and for my own family. It's not that I dislike you, right? Your husband works. Don't think I'm making these things up, right? We know every single year in parts of New Jersey, New York, and Israel, the beginning of the school year, thousands of girls cannot get into schools for the crime that their parents do jobs that the school community decided aren't jobs they're not respectable for our community. You understand? It's not about you. God forbid, I don't hate you, but it's under the guise of, I love my children, I love my people, I have to protect them, so therefore the other should be oppressed. That is Sodom. Sodom is making sure that I am okay by trampling you. And that's why Yeshayahu specifically compares the Jewish people to the lieutenants of Sodom and the nation of Amorah. Betsy, you had your hand up.
I wanted to ask, why would someone live in Sodom?
That's a great question. Why do you think somebody would live in Sodom?
Are you saying that they're protected from their own justice system?
You know, when you're in a system that's cruel, as long as you're in the inner circle, you have a wonderful life because you are always being taken care of. The problem is when you challenge the boundary and you now get thrown out, the wrath of the community that once loved you is what you experience as the brunt of the community. Yeah. When you join my club, I promise you I'm going to take care of you from birth to death. But we're going to talk about it soon, look at how the Jewish community today is set up. When you're in, literally, there are charity organizations that will make sure that the day you're born, you have 50,000 baby outfits, and then you get free formula, and you're somehow able to get onto housing programs and food assistance and convalescent, you name it. There are organizations for the rich and the poor, as long as you're one of us. The moment you're not, or the moment you're deemed not, you don't get to make the choice if you're one of us or not. The moment we decide you're not one of us, the wrath and the fury that's turned on the people is unbelievable. And that's what Yeshayahu is critiquing them. Let's continue reading a minute. Yeah, go back to source 1, to verse 11, Yud Aleph. Lama li rov zivchechem, yomer Adonai. Hashem says, you think I need all your sacrifices? Savati olot elim, v'chelev mirim, v'dam parim, u'kvasim, v'atudim lo chavatzli. I don't want all these sacrifices. You don't stop coming to the Bet HaMikdash. You're so holy, you're so righteous, you're bringing so many sacrifices. I don't want them. Ki tavo lerot panai. You come to see my face because you're such righteous people. Mi bikesh zos me'etchem, rimos chatzera. Who asked you to come and trample my house? Lo tosifu hevi minchat shav. Don't bring me these useless sacrifices. Ktoret toeva. Your incense that you bring is an abomination. Chodesh v'Shabbat kol mikra lo chol aven v'atzara. I can't stand that you come every Shabbat, every Rosh Chodesh. You come, you dress up in your best. 3 times a day you come to my place of worship, the Bet HaMikdash. I don't need you. I don't want you here. Chodshechem moadechem, on the holidays in the first of the month. Well, here we go. Sana nafshi hayu alay letorech nil'eti niso. I'm tired of carrying you. I don't want you here. ובפסכם כפיכם העלים עיניי. And when you turn to me, you spread your arms out and you start praying and crying, I'm just going to close my eyes. כי תרבות תפילה, it doesn't matter if you're going to pray. You could call as many prayer gatherings as you want. Okay? אינני שומע. I'm not listening. You could come and you could pray and you could say Avinu Malkeinu with thousands of people on microphones and you could rent out stadiums. I am not attending. Why? Yedechem damim malu. Because your hands are full of blood. Rachatzu, you want to know what you should do? It's really simple. Stop being religious. I don't need you to be so religious. I'm sick and tired of you religious. I'm sick and tired of all your religious practices. I'm sick and tired of how much money you're going to spend on things I never asked you to buy. On celebrating holidays I never even asked you to do. I'm sick and tired of it. Rachatzu, wash yourselves off from the sin. Hizaku, purify yourself. Hasiru ra ma'alechem, take the evil and just throw it away. Mineged einai chidlu hara, get rid of the evil. You want to know what the evil is? The evil is not that you're not religious. You understand? The evil is limdu hetev. Learn how to be good human beings. Dirshu mishpat. Seek justice. Ishur chamotz. Shiftu yatom. Look to get the oppression of those who are oppressed. Take care of the orphan. Rivu almana. Take up the fight for the widow. Notice the Navi is telling them, I don't need all your religious observance. Religious observance is nonsensical when the human being is evil. Go back to the basics. Start looking for good, for justice. Look to take care of those who are oppressed by society. Look to take care of those who don't have a voice. I don't need you to buy 12 different outfits for Shabbat. Can you for once look at the person in your community who doesn't have a meal for Shabbat because they don't fit into what you think they should and invite them? Can you for one moment open your heart to the person who doesn't look like you and doesn't speak like you and doesn't think like you and doesn't even observe like you? And just say hello to them. We're not even talking about inviting them over. How many times do people tell me, I don't want to go to the Bet Knesset anymore, I just feel so uncomfortable? I have a friend who is Jamaican. And like she says it, I'm not white, okay? One of the hardest things is when I would bring her to my neighborhood where my parents live, she would turn into a spectacle. So instead of being able to just pray, she suddenly became live TV. When did the Jewish community become like that? See, I don't care if you have 14 mezuzot on every doorway. You're not religious, let alone Jewish, if you can't look at society and the social problems and deal with them effectively. Because what happens is then your religion becomes disgusting. Your fanaticism becomes ugly, not just to humanity. There's a reason, I just saw, this made me so sad, on Israel TV. So you have somebody who's definitely from the very ultra-Orthodox camp get on TV, right? And the host is very clearly not from the same camp. And he starts with the interview and he says, Tishma achi, listen brother. In the end of the day, we're brothers. Right? I don't know who made up the term non-religious. Most people that I've met that were not religious were more religious than the religious counterparts. Yep. I don't know how you measure that. That's an interesting thing. Unless you're God, I'm not sure how you actually know. But the guy who's the ultra-Orthodox guy says, listen, please, don't call me your brother. I don't want to be a brother. I don't want us to be related. And then he continues the interview. And I'm looking at this and thinking to myself, you're the representative of God. You have nothing to do with the Jewish people. Maybe biologically you were born Jewish. That can be. But the Navi is telling us HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't need the external trappings of religion if the decency of humanity isn't there. The justice towards those who are different. I'm just looking at the time. Let's continue. So then the Navi continues. He says, the people are going to come and they're going to cry and wonder why things are going so wrong. And if you skip down, Hashem says, if you will just take on the cause of changing society, look at the last two verses, 26 and 27. And I will return the judges like they used to be in the past, when they were judges who brought justice and goodness, not evil and perversion. And the advisors like they used to be. After that, and only after justice is served, that's when you will be called the city of justice, the city of the righteous. Kiryan Ne'eman, the city of righteousness. Tzion b'mishpat tipadeh v'shaveh b'tzedakah. The only route to return is by bringing back justice, by fixing the crookedness of the society we've created. That's it. Stop coming up with new stringencies. Stop coming up with new ways to make people's lives more difficult. Stop figuring out every single year how we can add more nonsensical things to our repertoire of already nonsense that we do. Just go back and take care of society. It's that simple. Go back to setting up a system where people can trust that if they come to the leadership with a problem, the leadership's not going to take advantage of them. That the leadership isn't going to, there's nothing I could do. This is the way the community is. If there's nothing you could do, so then what makes you a leader? We have problems in our society that if leadership decided to tackle, they could. I'm always marveled by the fact that when there are problems, the leadership says, there's nothing we could do. I promise you, there's something you could do. You know why? I know that. Because if somebody had a cell phone that wasn't kosher in your school, you would throw them out and all their kids and make sure that their family never gets married. So you have power. You understand? When you want to enforce something, you have the power to enforce it. Why don't we do the same to those who hurt others? Right? We talk about the Aguna crisis. It's only a crisis because the leadership doesn't want to deal with it. There are solutions. There are really good solutions. But the leadership has to step up to the plate and the people have to step up to the plate. Instead of focusing on, did we get a menorah that cost $5,000 or $10,000? You could get one for $12 on Amazon and it's just as kosher. Yeah. Do we use 7 tablecloths on Pesach or aluminum foil? Who cares? You don't need to use either of them, right? Does she wear stockings that are black or does she wear stockings that are beige? Since when? Maybe she doesn't wear stockings at all. Since when does that matter? Yeshayahu is telling the people, you're focusing in the wrong areas. And then you're coming and you're wondering what went wrong. I want to share with you, if we continue a little bit, and I'm going to recommend you look at it a little more thoroughly on your own time. On page 3, Yeshayahu in chapter Nun Chet, chapter 58, again critiques the Jewish people where they come on fast days. They're fasting, they're tired, they're hungry, they're crying, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't answer. And he says very similar harsh words to them. He says, you think God needs you to fast? Do you think Hashem needs you fasting where half the day you're busy Googling recipes that you're going to make anyway afterwards and the other half the day you're busy shopping online? Who needs such a fast, honestly? You come to the Bet Knesset, you're fasting, and instead of fasting, all you're doing is you're gossiping with your friends, you're making fun of the person who's sitting to the right of you, to the left of you, you're being nasty to people. Who needs your fasts? All the actions, now, don't get me wrong, the actions are important. Okay, because obviously if HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave the 613 commandments, they weren't for no reason. But if the actions don't transform who we are as people, then the actions are not just worthless, they're disgusting. Yeah? I want to look at, with you, page 4. Yeah. Miriam, question?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, because before we had the prophet to tell us this, and now we don't really know whether if we're praying and asking Hashem all these things, he might say, look, I'm not listening to you because you guys are evil in a different way and there's so much going on in your community that you're not doing. And how do we know that like Hashem is actually listening to us? Because we don't have a temple, so okay, he's not going to get any burnt offerings from us. So the only thing we have is the prayer. But if that channel is blocked, then and we don't have prophets, then who's there to rebuke us?
So that's a really good question. And I think we prefaced it with, I'm not a prophet. Anybody that tells you they are, I know a good psychiatrist for them, okay? What we do have, though, is we have the words of our prophets, which is look at the problems that plagued society then and the consequences, and then do a comparison, right? The Jewish community was very religious. They were coming to the Bet Midrash, they were bringing sacrifices, they were coming and praying, and yet the oppression of humanity was so great that the Navi says, listen, all this religion that you're doing is nonsensical because on a humanistic level, you have created Sodom. You've created a bunch of laws, but the laws are meant to pervert justice, not to bring justice. Your laws are meant to protect those who are in power and to hurt those who aren't. And again, if you look at society today, we have to ask ourselves, have we changed? Have we changed? Have we come to a place where we have a society as Jewish people, and we'll talk about soon a world at large, where racism doesn't exist? Have we changed where we can sit across the table of people from all different colors and denominations and races, ethnicities, and just be decent human beings? I'm not even talking about friends. Decent human beings to each other. Right? Do we live in a world, I was recently in downtown San Diego and it was pouring, okay? Not London rain, San Diego rain. So it rains for 5 minutes and then the sun shines and then it rains for another 5 minutes. And I saw cardboard boxes. And I was wondering, because I didn't think that you're allowed to put, I know in New York you could put garbage out by the curb, but in San Diego I didn't know you could. And then I saw the cardboard boxes moving. And I understood that it's not cardboard boxes of trash, but there are people underneath. And I'm sitting in my car, right? And thinking, how in the world could I sit in a car with heat, yeah? Driving back to a house that has food, clothing, shelter, bedrooms, couches, and there are people on my streets, and you should know most of the people on the streets of San Diego are veterans. So we're talking about people who gave their lives so that I can walk free. How can we say we live in a just society? I'm still, this happened to me last week, Friday. How could it be? How could it be that we live in a world that there are people who are still starving? It doesn't make sense. We live in a world, sometimes I go to Costco frequently. The plenty that there is. We always shop for milk. We always say it's the most expensive milk we ever buy. Somehow you went in for $5.99 milk, you come out with a $200 bill with a bunch of things you never needed. How could it be on the one hand there are people who have so much, and there are people who can't make it to tomorrow? How could it be? Meaning, how could it be that we live in a society that on the one hand has advanced so much, and on a social level, in very many ways has stagnated, hasn't moved past the social issues? I want to look at with you for a second. You find over here, the ultimate leader, right? If you had to think of the ultimate leader, it's going to be Moshe Rabbeinu, right? Moshe Rabbeinu. What defines him as a leader? So if you look at source 5, it says, Vayhi bayamim hahem, and it was during those days, Vayigdal Moshe, and Moshe grew up, Vayetze lechav, and he goes out to his brothers, Vayar besivlotam, and he saw their burdens, Vayar ish mitzri makeh ish ivri me'achav, and he sees that there's an Egyptian hitting one of his brothers. And Rashi over there says, what does it mean, Vayar besivlotam, and he saw on their burden, Natan einav v'libo liot metzer alehem. Everybody sees things, right? A whole day you see things, but our minds, right, know how to filter. So you and I may stand on the same street corner, and depending on what you're interested in, you may see very different things. So if you like fashion, you may notice what everyone's wearing, okay? If you're a new attorney, you may notice all the sidewalk cracks and the potential places people may sue, right? If you're a businessman, You may see all the advertisements for the different businesses and what opened and what we're all saying the same thing, but we all focus in on different things. What defines Moshe as a leader, that he's grown up, is the fact that he's able to look, and not just look, but perceive the depth of oppression that his brothers are going through. It doesn't say this is when he knew Tanakh by heart. Yeah? It doesn't say this is when he fasted for 40 days. It doesn't say this is when he put on fuzzy hats on his head. It doesn't say this is when he wore tzitzit that reached his ankles. It doesn't say this is when she wore a mitpachat that covered her eyebrows. Okay? It doesn't say that. It doesn't say this is when she decided to only eat chalav Yisrael. It doesn't say that. It says this is when Moshe Rabbeinu sees the oppression of his fellow brothers and he decides to take action. That is what defines him as a leader. Look at the cartoon over here for a minute. How many of you read My Animal Farm? Yes? Yes? Okay. I recommend you read it. It's a really good book. I'm actually in the middle of one of his other books called 1984, I think. I found that my high school girls are reading it. It sounds eerily real, so I'm not sure. I'll give you my review of it. So this is a quote from his book. Now, I'll give you the synopsis of the story is that the animals feel oppressed by the people. So they are inspired to rebel. The end of the story is that the animals on the farm, specifically the pigs, become just as cruel as their people. Yeah. So here's a quote. All animals are created equal, but some animals are more equal than others. We live with this concept of, yeah, of course, we know everybody was created with a tzelem Elohim, everybody has godly spark, everybody's equal, but some of us are just more equal than others. Some of us are just more privileged than others. And whereas you may look at it and say, that's lunacy. Either we're equal or we're not. We live in that kind of world. And Chacham Va'or has a very interesting article on why we have this need to create an other. Yeah, maybe I'll attach it to our source sheets. I'll send it to you. Why we have this need to, it's us and it's them. There's always, everywhere. I'm Ashkenaz and you're Sephardic. I'm Sephardic and you're Ashkenaz. I'm Hasidish, which kind of Hasidut? Oh no, I'm not Hasid, I'm Lithuanian. Seriously, being Jew, people always ask me, what are you? I say Jewish. No, what kind of Jew? I said, Jewish is a category enough. Why do I need to be something else? We have this intrinsic need to put ourselves in boxes. Now, I have no problem if you want to live in a box. But when you create a box that is so cruel to everybody outside of it, that's when it becomes problematic. When anybody that's not in your little box that you've created, in your little bubble, doesn't count, doesn't matter. I'll give you an example. Recently, okay, no politics, but recently President Trump, at the end of his presidency, pardoned a lot of people. That's what normally happens here in the United States. At the end of a presidency, there are a lot of pardons. Now, as you know, on a personal level, I'm very happy for anybody that gets out of prison because I believe the system is so faulty and so dangerous that it doesn't work. It's a system that needs an overhaul completely. So on a personal level, I'm really happy when people get out of prison, okay? There was a Jewish guy who had committed, now I say Jewish, very Orthodox guy, I can't say religious, who had committed one of the biggest frauds in the United States history. Okay? He got pardoned. Now on a personal, like I said, I'm very happy. He had an 800-year sentence. You understand?
Is it Jared Kushner's father?
No, I'm not going to tell. I told you, no politics. He's considered highly ultra-Orthodox. Miriam, I'll say the least, he's considered an ultra-Orthodox Jew. Okay? Now, like I said, I'm very happy he's home. But from coming home to now turning into a Jewish celebrity, what does it tell you about the Orthodox community? Yeah, I'll tell you what it tells you. When I was in 12th grade, there were girls my age from a different state who all went to sign up for something called HUD. You know what HUD is? Okay. HUD stands for Housing Urban Development. Now, it's meant for people who live below the poverty line and need housing, either assistance or actual, but the wait list is ridiculous. Yeah, I checked in the San Diego County, the wait list is 10 years, which is laughable. You sign up today, somebody's homeless today, so wait 10 years, you might get some housing assistance. The person's gonna be dead in 10 years. Yeah? So why are they signing up in 12th grade? They're not engaged or married, but in the future, they're gonna wanna get housing assistance, right? So we're sending buses of girls and boys to sign up at the office. I have a friend of mine who recently, right, 10 years later, got on. The problem is, she lives in a location that's saturated with housing assistance already, so they're not willing to give more. So she got somebody to rent her a space fictitiously elsewhere. She has now mail that comes there, envelopes, and she's able to get her housing assistance there, transfer it over to where she does live, and it's one big scam. Okay? Now, if I were to tell you she's an isolated incident, I would be lying. Because we've created a community where, God forbid, we don't steal from people. Of course not. Down to the last penny. I've had people who ran after me in stores. I forgot to give you 5 extra cents of change. You understand? But the other, I'm gonna let us steal from. The government, why not? The government steals from us, I'm gonna let us steal from them. You understand? Meaning, when you're in my circle, of course God forbid, I would never steal a penny from you. But the other, why shouldn't we're allowed to scam them. We're allowed to steal from them. And you have to ask yourself a question, how could that be? Meaning, how could you be so fanatically religious when the basics of social justice you don't uphold? Right? Yeah.
Isn't it more problematic that so many people need housing so badly and they have to go on it and scam their way into it or whatever? Isn't that more of a problem?
Okay, so Sarla, I agree with you. This is just a symptom of a much bigger problem. The real problem is the entire view on parnasa, on finances, and on education. Meaning there are structural issues with, and you're right, meaning the symptom that we see of poverty is just a much bigger issue, which is linked to how the community views education and finances. Meaning we end up, not me, but the community ends up not allowing people to learn, to get higher education, to get jobs. So we create people who become dependent. And dependence is very good if you need control. But we create tragedies where human beings who are capable of working, who should be able to support themselves, who should be able to make a normal lifestyle. In fact, I don't remember where, but I think the Rambam, but maybe the Gemara. The Gemara says that a person has to teach their child a clean trade. Because if they don't, then ultimately their child will become robbers. That's what they're gonna become thieves. We see that in practice today. Meaning if you do not teach your children a clean practice, what is a clean practice? Anything you do that makes you money without stealing. Yeah, there's no job somebody once told me they don't want their dad to be a certain job. I said, I don't understand you. Any job is more respectable than no job. That's the truth. Any job where you make a salary and you bring home your money, that's respectable. But I agree with you, Sarla. This is a symptom of a much bigger problem. Now I have a question for you. It's 1:35. I'm happy to go on another half hour, but I know it's late for you. So you give me a heads up and you tell me what you're feeling, and then we'll take it from there.
Sorry about that. I have to head out in 5 minutes, but hopefully I'll be able to catch up from the recording.
So I'm thinking of this. Why don't we do this? Let's do 5 more minutes, and then we'll open the class, and whoever wants to stay and chat a little bit, chat. We're not necessarily going to get through all the sources. I'm going to send you follow-up, exactly what do we do in the next week together. So you'll end up looking at the sources yourself. But we have here, I want to read to you 2 sources. Yes, if we could do 2 and then go with that. So you find over here this concept, and if you look at 8, protectia, right? Protectia just means I have it in with those who I need to, right? It's not what you know, it's who you know. So you have actually a term that's been developed, and I believe it's been formally used by the Hasidic community, known as Anash, it's an acronym for Anshe Shlomenu, people of our kin, right? People who we live in peace with, versus the Lithuanians, the Mitnagdim. This term has been used, for example, people would write letters. Let's say I need a letter of recommendation. So the rabbi of my community would write, and on the top they would write Hanal Anash. Yeah? And it would be a code so that the other rabbi in the next community, he reads and he says, oh, he's one of us. And it tells me, take care of him. Similar to if you look at the bottom in English, it's TPIOOO. I don't know if you've ever seen that acronym, which is, this person was one of ours, right? You're one of us. So if you're one of us, we'll take care of you. I want to look at you, again, these two sources, and we'll end with that. If there's somebody who had a grand plan for the Jewish people, it's going to be Harav Uziel. I highly recommend his book by Mark Angel, Loving Truth and Peace, The Grand Religious Worldview of Rabbi Ben Zion Uziel. You're going to bump into a giant that you've never met. You've never discovered. Somebody who understood the world, understood humanity, understood how to bridge gaps. So I want to read to you. Yeah, I'm on source 9. In 1917, after the announcement of the Balfour Declaration, which recognized the rights of Jews to their own state in the land of Israel, Arab violence against Jews intensified. Armed Arabs attacked Jews in Petach Tikva, Hadera, Yafo, and other places. The Jews defended themselves heroically, but the British, unnerved by the Arab violence, decided to pacify the Arabs by restricting Jewish immigration into the land of Israel. This decision obviously enraged the Jews. Tensions continued to mount. During attacks on Jews in 1921, one group of Arabs engaged in a shooting battle with Jewish defenders. Rabbi Uziel, who was the chief rabbi before the State of Israel, learning of this battle, dressed in his rabbinical garb and went to the area of combat. He asked the Jews to hold their fire. He then walked in front of the Arab line. He called on them also to hold their fire. They did. Rabbi Uziel, standing alone in the field between the two camps, turned to the Arabs and spoke to them in Arabic. A key to solving Middle East problems is being Middle Eastern, not European occupiers, but that's a different conversation for another time. He reminded them that the land of Israel had been under many rulers over the centuries, ever since the Jews had been exiled by the Romans in antiquity, and that now the Jews intended to reestablish Jewish rule in their ancient homeland. The land had been desolate and disease-infested, but the Jews had come and improved conditions dramatically, benefiting all the inhabitants of the land. This remarkable development was a sign of God's providence, of his hand in the destiny of this land. The land of Israel had vast blessings, some of which had already been brought to light, and most of which would appear in the future, bringing happiness and prosperity to all residents of this amazing land. Rav Uziel urged the Arabs to make peace with the Jews so that all could work together in love and respect. Listen to the following comments that he makes. After these comments, he moved closer to the Arab antagonists and called out to them in great emotions. Our cousins, our mutual ancestor, Avraham, father of Yitzhak and Yishmael, when he saw that his nephew Lot felt constricted and complained that he could no longer live together, he said to him, "Let there be no feud between me and you, nor between my shepherds and your shepherds, for we are brothers. So too do we say to you, the land will carry us all, will sustain us all. Let's stop the feuds between us. We are brothers." The Arabs were moved by the rabbi's words and by his courage. They put their guns away, and the battle came to an end for the moment. Do you understand the leadership? Do you understand that the ability to be a Jewish leader has nothing to do with the religiosity and everything to do with your view on social humanity? The ability to look at the enemy who is shooting and say, you're one of us. We're not leaving. We're not giving up the land. We're going to have our differences. But you're one of us. There's room for you here. It's not me and everybody else. I want to read to you and end with this. Rav Uziel, in his grand view of what does redemption look like for the Jewish people. So he says the following. He says, "Tudata shel Yahadut, the goal of Judaism, hi lekro l'shalom et kol ha'adam." The ultimate goal of Judaism, our mission, is to call in peace to all of humanity. Lilu'umeim, to their nations, v'goyeim, and their people, mimamlachotehem, to their leadership, v'altzotehem, and to their lands. Look at the bold. Gulat Yisrael eino gula atzmit. The redemption of the Jewish people is not an individual national redemption. אבל היא גאולת כל האדם. The goal of the Jewish nation being redeemed is so that we could then go ahead and redeem those who are oppressed ממלחמותיו המרובות והמושכלות, from any regime that oppresses, hurts, מעבדותו לדעות זרות, from having to believe in things that are not true, ואמונות טפלות, and stupid religious beliefs, ולממלכות עריצות, או לצביעות דתית מזויפת. Our goal is to bring redemption, freedom of spirit, not just to the Jewish community, but to the entire world, from the regimes, from the leadership, from the religions that oppress, violate. אין היהדות שואפת לשינוי סדרי עולם וערכי חיים. Our redemption is not looking to change nature. No heebie-dweebie stuff. Nature is not changing. אבל שאיפתה הגדולה היא לבטל השלטנות המדינית והדתית שהיא עושקת ורוצצת. Our goal for redemption is to be able to create a superpower that will then relieve and alleviate this pain and suffering of those who are still oppressed. That's the goal of redemption. מחניאה ומשובדת, וזו שעתידתה להיבטל בימות המשיח, and this whole idea that Mashiach is going to come, right, and all the fantastical things that we believe are going to happen, אינה רק לגבי ישראל. It's not just about the Jewish people, אלא כלפי כל האנושיות כולה. It's towards all of humanity. The goal of a personal redemption is so that once we are free from the shackles of the injustices of society, we then give the gift back. When we look at the world and we say there's injustice, the UN, which I'm not a fan of, if you go on, they have a whole doctrine of, if they followed it would be very nice, of the social justice issues that the world is being faced with. Poverty, trafficking, abuse, killings, war. Our goal as Jewish people is not to light a bunch of menorahs in people's communities. It's a really nice idea, it doesn't do anything. Yeah? We already talked about all the challah bakes in the world are useless. It would be much wiser to take all the challah you made and then go donate it to people who don't have money, to people who are dying because they're starving. The idea of the Jewish people doing teshuvah, of returning, is directly linked to bringing justice to society. And the only way to bring justice is by stopping to create this other. I'll take care of my people, the anash, the anshe shlomenu, the people I'm at peace with, of course I take care of them. But anybody that I perceive on the other coin, on the other side, because they look, they think, they act, they affiliate differently than me, I don't care about them. I don't mind scamming them. I don't mind hurting them. I don't mind stealing from them. I don't mind bad-mouthing them, because they're not one of us. And if you're not one of us, then what difference does it make? I can turn a blind eye and become like Sodom and Amorah. And my push to us is, let's stop being so religious and let's start being Jewish. Let's start taking on causes that matter, causes that the Jewish people have been championing for years, values of justice, and bring it to our communities. I want to read you one last quote. Louis Brandeis was the first Jewish justice of the Supreme Court in the United States. He was officially made the Associate Justice in 1916, and he was a pioneer in social justice. He was especially against the corrupt businesses, banks. And here's a great quote. He says, "Publicity is justly commended as a remedy for social and industrial diseases. Sunlight is said to be the best of disinfectants. Electric lights, the most efficient policeman." You see, when you don't talk about issues, then they don't exist. And when they don't exist, you don't have to take care of them. See, if the Jewish community never talks about the sexual abuse that happens, that means that we don't have any sexual abuse. You understand? If the Jewish community never talks about the oppression of the other and the blatant racism that we experience within our own communities, it means it doesn't exist. Then we could show the world we're perfect because we don't have those problems. Understand? Louis Brandeis says, the best way to solve the problems is exposure. Now, my goal is not, you know what muckrakers are? They just expose a bunch of filth, yeah? And then they leave it out there to the public. And whereas there is value to it, right? I don't see great value in going on a smear campaign for no reason. Rather, we're a group of friends. We're a small group of trusted colleagues who have to say, I want to be more Jewish. And if I want to be more Jewish, I don't need to take on the fight on collarbones showing, because there are thousands of other women who are taking on that fight, okay? I don't need to be the one policing the women on what they can and can't do, because there are thousands of other women who are doing that already. Thank you. We have enough of you. We're the people who are standing up for the oppressed. We're the people who are standing up for the injustices that are all being done under the guise of this is Jewish law. There's nothing I can do. This is what the Torah says. That's what the Torah says. Then clearly you and I don't have the same book. Because my book says stop the evil. Stop the injustice against those who are vulnerable, against those who don't have a voice, against those who are afraid to stand up for themselves. And that's what our goal is. Our goal is to be from those people who are not afraid to be like Yeshayahu Hanavi, who are not afraid to stand up, not because we hate the Jewish people. See, when you hate the people, it's easy to criticize them. But when we look at our community and say, I love you, I'm one of you, betoch ami anochi yoshevet, right? The Isha Shunamit says, I'm one of my people. I'm not talking to you from up here. I'm talking to you because I'm one of you. Let's focus on the social issues. And Be'ezrat Hashem, I believe that if we focus on the basics of creating a human and just society, so then it's going to be V'ashiva shovtaich kevarishona. The judges will return to what they once were. V'yoatzaich kevatchila, and the advisors will be people who we could trust. We could listen. People will know when they come for advice, they're not going to become victimized again. The victim won't be hurt again and again and again by the community. And a victim of anything. And ultimately, Tzion b'mishpat tibadev v'shaveh b'tzedakah. The goal is that Yerushalayim, the Jewish nation, will become the nation of the champions of social justice. When the world will say, hey, these are the problems we face, where do we figure out how to solve it? They're going to know, come to the Jews. You want to see what a solved, just society looks like? Go look at the Jewish community. Be'ezrat Hashem, you and I are going to partner and go ahead and do that. Let me just stop.